My name is Lucy and I'm 28. My brother just told me I'm too ugly to be in his wedding photos. In front of our entire family. At his engagement dinner. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely betrayed by family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up and tell you how this delightful family moment came to be. Because honestly, if someone had told me 3 months ago that I'd be sitting here planning my brother's financial downfall, I would have laughed. But here we are, and I'm apparently the villain in this story. Or so they think. 3 months ago, I thought I had the perfect relationship with my brother Daniel. We were close, texting daily, celebrating each other's wins, the whole sibling goals thing. When Mom and Dad went through their messy divorce, Daniel and I were each other's emotional support system. When I graduated with my master's degree, he drove 6 hours just to cheer for me in the audience. When he got promoted to senior analyst, I threw him a surprise party that he still talks about. Then he met Olivia. And apparently, sisters became optional. Now don't get me wrong, I was genuinely happy for Daniel at first. He deserved love, deserved someone who made him smile the way he did when he talked about her. But from the moment I met Olivia, I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. You know that look some people get when they're calculating how much you might interfere with their plans? Yeah, that one. It started small. Innocent little scheduling conflicts that somehow always involved me. My birthday dinner? Oh, we already made these reservations months ago, she'd say with that perfectly practiced apologetic smile. My graduation ceremony? Well, wouldn't you know it? They'd booked a romantic weekend getaway that just happened to fall on the same dates. Because nothing says supportive future sister-in-law like systematically avoiding every important moment in your boyfriend's sister's life, right? The pattern was so subtle at first that I actually questioned my own sanity. Was I being paranoid? Was I reading too much into innocent coincidences? Spoiler alert, I wasn't. But hey, at least I was getting a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Always a useful skill to have. Every family gathering became a careful dance around Olivia's comfort level. She'd monopolize Daniel's attention with inside jokes that excluded everyone else, suggest activities that somehow never included me, and develop mysterious ailments whenever plans involved extended family time. Christmas last year was my personal favorite. She got a sudden migraine right before gift exchange, but felt well enough to post Instagram stories from a wine bar an hour later. The level of commitment to avoidance was almost impressive. But the real masterpiece came 2 months ago when Daniel called with what he called exciting news. "Lucy, I need to ask you something important," he said, his voice carrying that serious tone that usually meant someone was either pregnant or getting arrested. Shoot. "Olivia and I are buying a house." "Daniel, that's amazing. Where?" "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. We found this incredible place. Colonial style, big yard, perfect neighborhood. But we need a co-signer for the mortgage." And there it was. The moment when I went from being the sister who might ruin photos to the sister whose credit score was suddenly very attractive. "Our combined income is just barely short of what we need," he continued. "And with Olivia's student loans, I didn't even hesitate." "Yes, you don't even know the details yet." "I don't need to. You're my brother." Because that's what you do for family, right? You show up. You support them. You sign financial documents that could potentially destroy your credit if things go south. You know, normal sister stuff. The bank appointment was scheduled for that Thursday. I took time off work, wore my most professional outfit, and showed up ready to help my brother achieve his dreams. Olivia was there too, of course, thanking me with words that sounded rehearsed but felt genuine enough. She even brought me coffee, the good kind from that expensive place downtown. For a brief moment sitting in that bank office, I thought maybe I'd been wrong about her. Maybe she was finally warming up to me. Maybe this house purchase would bring us together as a family. Oh, sweet summer child that I was. The loan was substantial, more than I was entirely comfortable with, to be honest. But Daniel assured me it was just a formality. "The bank just wants extra security," he explained. "We'll never miss a payment. This is just paperwork." Famous last words, as they say. I signed every document the banker put in front of me. Co-signer agreements, liability waivers, promises to pay if the primary borrowers defaulted, the whole terrifying stack of legal papers that essentially made me responsible for someone else's $250,000 dream. "Thank you," Daniel said as we left the bank, his arm around Olivia's shoulders. "I owe you everything, Lucy. I won't forget this." Olivia smiled and squeezed my hand. "You're the best sister-in-law anyone could ask for." Future sister-in-law, technically, but who's counting? For 6 weeks after that, everything seemed perfect. Daniel and Olivia found their dream house. A gorgeous colonial with hardwood floors, a massive kitchen, and enough space for the family they were planning. They were excited, making lists, talking about paint colors and furniture arrangements. Daniel would call me with updates, asking my opinion on everything from light fixtures to landscaping. It felt like we were close again, like I was part of something important, like signing those papers had somehow earned me a permanent place in their lives instead of just their mortgage. I should have known better. The engagement party invitation arrived on elegant cardstock with gold foil lettering, the kind of invitation that screams, "We spent more on stationery than most people spend on groceries this month." Beautiful calligraphy spelling out, "Daniel Matthews and Olivia Henderson request your presence at an engagement celebration." It was genuinely excited. Finally, a family event where I could celebrate my brother without worrying about mysterious scheduling conflicts or sudden illnesses. I bought a new dress, nothing flashy, just a simple navy sheath that made me feel confident. I even splurged on professional hair and makeup because, hey, if you're going to celebrate your brother's engagement, you might as well look good doing it. The restaurant was exactly the kind of upscale place Olivia would choose. Soft lighting, white linens, the sort of atmosphere that whispers, "This cost more than your rent." I walked in feeling happy, grateful, ready to toast to love and family and all those good things you're supposed to feel at engagement parties. And that's when I saw the table. Standing in that restaurant entrance, counting place settings like I was solving a math problem, I had what you might call a moment of clarity. You know that feeling when reality hits you like a cold slap and suddenly everything makes perfect sense? Yeah, that. 11 place settings, 11 chairs, 11 champagne glasses sparkling under the ambient lighting, 12 family members present and accounted for. I mean, I'm no mathematician, but even I can do basic subtraction. And apparently, I was the one being subtracted from this particular equation. The hostess approached with that professional smile service workers perfect when they sense drama brewing. "Are you looking for your party, miss?" "I think there might be a mistake with the reservation," I said, still holding on to that last shred of hope that this was some kind of elaborate misunderstanding. She checked her tablet with the efficiency of someone who's dealt with family drama before. "Matthews Henderson party, correct? Party of 11. Confirmed this morning. Party of 11. Confirmed this morning." Let me just pause here to appreciate the sheer audacity of that detail. This wasn't a last-minute oversight or some innocent booking error. This was planned, confirmed, and executed with the precision of a military operation. Honestly, I was almost impressed by the commitment to the scheme. "No," I heard myself say with remarkable calm. "I think I'm at the wrong event." Because what was I supposed to say? "Actually, I'm the sister who co-signed their mortgage, and I'm pretty sure I should have been invited to celebrate the engagement I'm financially supporting." That would have made for an interesting conversation with the hostess. I turned around and walked straight back to my car, my heels clicking against the restaurant floor with what I hoped sounded like dignity rather than defeat. Through the window, I could see my family settling into their seats, passing around appetizers, raising their glasses in what looked like the first toast of the evening. Nobody was looking toward the door. Nobody seemed to notice that Lucy, the one who made their mortgage possible, was walking away. The drive home was interesting, and by interesting I mean I spent 20 minutes crying in restaurant parking lot before I could see well enough to drive safely. My phone started ringing before I even reached the highway, Daniel's name lighting up my dashboard like a beacon of false concern. I let it go to voicemail, then it rang again, and again. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had accumulated 7 missed calls and counting. 7 calls from someone who had apparently forgotten to invite me to his engagement party, but remembered my phone number just fine when my absence became noticeable. I sat in my car for a full 10 minutes staring at my phone before I finally worked up the courage to listen to his messages. Each one was a masterclass in deflection and damage control. "Lucy, hey, it's me. Mom said you stopped by the restaurant but left? What happened? Call me back." "Lucy, seriously, what's going on? Everyone's asking where you are." "Okay, this is getting weird. Did something happen? Are you sick?" And my personal favorite, "Lucy, you're making this about you again. Just call me back." Making this about me. Again. Because expecting to be included in my own brother's engagement celebration is clearly narcissistic behavior. My mistake. I deleted all the voicemails without listening to Therest, and went inside to pour myself what my therapist would probably call an inappropriately large glass of wine. Sitting on my couch, still in my fancy dress that nobody got to see, I started putting together the timeline of this particular masterpiece. The invitation had been so formal, so perfectly worded. None of Daniel's usual casual, "Hey, want to come to dinner" style. The restaurant choice was pure Olivia. The guest list had been carefully curated to include everyone except the person whose financial backing was making their dreams possible. This wasn't an oversight. This was strategy. My phone buzzed with a text. "Where did you go?" This is really embarrassing for Olivia. Embarrassing for Olivia. Not, "I'm sorry there was confusion," or "let me figure out what happened." Embarrassing for Olivia. Another text. Can you at least respond so I know you're alive? And then, Lucy, come on. Don't be dramatic. Don't be dramatic. Right. Because expecting basic human decency from family is clearly an overreaction on my part. I turned off my phone and ran a bath, soaking in hot water that was infinitely more welcoming than my brother's engagement party. I tried to figure out exactly when I had become the problem in my own family's story. When had wanting to support Daniel become making everything about me? When had caring about our relationship turned into being dramatic? When had I become the family member who needed to be managed rather than celebrated? The worst part wasn't even the exclusion itself. It was the calculated nature of it. This wasn't someone forgetting to add me to a group text. This was someone looking at a list of people to invite to celebrate their love and consciously deciding I didn't belong there. But hey, at least they still wanted my credit score. That was apparently still welcome at family events. I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete and total clarity about where I stood in my family's hierarchy of importance. Spoiler alert, it wasn't a very high ranking, but when I woke up the next morning, something had shifted. The hurt was still there, sure, but underneath it was something much more useful. Anger. Not the explosive, destructive kind that makes you send regrettable text messages at 2 a.m. The cold, calculating kind that makes you see situations with perfect clarity and act accordingly. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and pulled up my bank account. There it was. The mortgage I'd co-signed exactly 63 days ago. The house Daniel and Olivia were buying with my financial backing. The dream home I'd made possible because I believed in family loyalty. Funny how perspective can change overnight. The loan documents were surprisingly easy to find in my email, probably because I'm the kind of person who saves important financial paperwork instead of letting it disappear into digital oblivion. I reread every clause, every condition, every tiny print detail that I'd glossed over in my eagerness to help my brother. And there it was, buried in section 12.3. Cosigner may request removal from loan obligation during the first 90 days of agreement with written notice to lender. 90 days. We were currently on day 63. I sat there with my coffee getting cold, staring at that clause and feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Power. For the first time since this whole mess started, I had options. Real, concrete options with real, concrete consequences. My phone had been buzzing all morning with increasingly frantic messages from Daniel, but I hadn't looked at any of them. I wasn't ready to hear his excuses or Olivia's explanations or my family's attempts to convince me that I was overreacting to being deliberately excluded from a family celebration. Instead, I opened a new document and started typing, "To whom it may concern, I hereby request the immediate removal of my name as co-signer on loan number." 27 words. That's all it took to dismantle someone's entire future. But I didn't send it immediately. Call it sentimentality, or call it giving him one last chance. I wanted to hear Daniel's explanation before I made any irreversible decisions. Maybe there was some reasonable explanation for what happened. Maybe this was all some elaborate misunderstanding that would make perfect sense once he explained it. Yeah, I know. But hope dies hard, even when it's being strangled by evidence. I got dressed and drove to his apartment, the same apartment where I'd helped him celebrate his promotion, where we'd spent countless evenings watching movies and complaining about our parents. The apartment where he'd first told me about meeting Olivia, his face lighting up like he'd discovered something magical. Daniel answered the door in pajamas at 11 a.m., looking like he'd been hit by a truck. His hair was doing that thing where it sticks up at weird angles, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was holding a coffee mug like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Lucy, thank God. Where have you been? I've been calling you all night." "I know." He stepped aside to let me in, and I could see Olivia on the couch in matching pajamas, laptop open, typing furiously. Probably crafting the narrative of poor Daniel's unstable sister who couldn't handle adult celebrations. "Look, about last night," Daniel started before I'd even sat down. "There was a mix-up with the reservation. The restaurant said they could only accommodate 11 people, and we thought you might prefer a smaller celebration anyway. You know how you get at big family gatherings. How I get. Like I'm some kind of social disaster who ruins parties just by existing." "A mix-up," I repeated, keeping my voice perfectly neutral. "Right. Olivia called this morning and straightened everything out with the restaurant. We're going to have another dinner next weekend. Just for you. Just for me. Like a consolation prize. Like a participation trophy for the family member who couldn't make it to the real event." "That's very thoughtful," I said. "But I'm not here about the party." Daniel's face brightened with relief, like he'd just dodged a bullet. "Oh, good. I was worried you were really upset about that. So what's up?" I looked around their apartment, at the wedding magazines scattered on every surface, at the paint samples taped to the walls, at the notebook where Olivia had been planning their future in the house I was helping them buy. I'm here to tell you I'm removing my name from your mortgage. You know that moment in movies where everything goes silent and all you can hear is someone's sharp intake of breath? This was like that, except it was real life and nobody was going to yell cut and reset the scene. Daniel's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. Olivia's typing ceased abruptly, her fingers frozen over the keyboard like she'd just been paused. What? Daniel said, because apparently intelligent conversation was beyond his capabilities at that moment. You heard me. I'm withdrawing as your co-signer. You have until 5 p.m. today to find alternative financing, or the bank will cancel your loan. Lucy, you can't be serious. Olivia finally found her voice, and it was sharp with disbelief. You're going to destroy our future over a seating chart? I turned to look at her directly. This woman who had systematically excluded me from my brother's life and was now acting like I was the unreasonable one. This isn't about the seating chart, Olivia. This is about respect. Something you clearly don't understand. Respect? She stood up, her laptop sliding off her lap onto the couch. Respect is not throwing a tantrum when adults are trying to have a civilized celebration. A civilized celebration that I wasn't invited to? You were invited, Daniel interjected desperately. There was just a miscommunication about the— Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop lying to me, Daniel. I called the restaurant this morning. They told me you personally confirmed a party of 11 yesterday afternoon. You knew exactly how many seats you were reserving, and you knew I wasn't getting one of them. The silence that followed was the sound of people realizing their carefully constructed story had just collapsed under the weight of actual facts. Daniel's face went through several expressions: guilt, panic, anger, before settling on defensive irritation. Fine, he said. You want the truth? Olivia was stressed about the party. She thought it might be easier if we kept the guest list small. Small, I repeated. 11 people is small. You know what I mean. Actually, I don't. Explain it to me. He glanced at Olivia, who was watching this conversation like she was calculating how much damage control would be required afterward. You can be intense sometimes, Lucy, especially around Olivia. She thought it would be more comfortable for everyone if I wasn't there. If we kept things simple this time. There it was. The truth, finally. I was too intense, too complicated, too much work to include in my own brother's celebration. Olivia found my presence uncomfortable, so the solution was to pretend I didn't exist. I see, I said calmly. So when you said you owed me everything for co-signing your mortgage, what you meant was that you owed me everything except basic human decency. That's not fair, isn't it? Let me make sure I understand this correctly. I'm good enough to guarantee your $250,000 debt, but I'm too intense to sit at your dinner table? Neither of them had an answer for that one, which was answer enough. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. Well, the good news is that you won't have to worry about my intensity affecting your mortgage payments. What are you doing? Daniel asked, his voice rising with panic. I'm sending my withdrawal letter to the bank. I hit send. If you've never seen two people's entire future crumble in real time, let me paint you a picture. It's like watching a controlled demolition, except nobody was controlling it and the building was their entire life plan. Daniel went pale as printer paper. Olivia made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. For a moment, nobody moved, like we were all frozen in this tableau of financial destruction. Lucy, you can't, Daniel said, reaching for my phone as if he could somehow unsend an email. We close on the house in 2 weeks. I know. You'll destroy our credit. We'll lose our deposit. We'll lose everything. I know. Olivia was frantically typing on her laptop again. There has to be something we can do. Can you call them back? Can you withdraw the withdrawal? The optimism was almost touching, really. Like believing you can catch a falling piano if you just reach fast enough. The bank was very clear about the terms when I originally signed. I said with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to very slow children. Once I submit written notice to remove my name, it's final. You have until close of business today to secure alternative financing. Daniel sank into his armchair like his strings had been cut. Why are you doing this to us? I'm not doing anything to you, Daniel. I'm doing something for me. I'm protecting my financial interests from people who clearly don't value my personal interests. Your interests? Olivia snapped. What interests? You're not losing anything here, aren't I? I gestured around their apartment, at all the wedding planning materials, at the life they were building with my credit score's assistance, while systematically erasing me from the actual experience. I guaranteed a loan for someone who doesn't think I deserve a seat at his engagement party. That seems like a pretty significant risk to me. That was one dinner, Lucy. One misunderstanding. Was it? Let's review, shall we? I pretended to count on my fingers like I was tallying up evidence for a jury. There was my birthday dinner that got mysteriously canceled because you two had emergency travel plans. My master's graduation that you missed for your romantic weekend getaway. Christmas when you left early because Olivia had a headache but somehow felt well enough to post Instagram stories from that wine bar. Should I continue? Each example landed like a small explosion. I could see Daniel remembering, recognizing the pattern he'd been too willfully blind to see before. Those were all legitimate, Olivia started. They were all calculated, I interrupted. You've been systematically removing me from Daniel's life for over a year. And he's let you do it because apparently it's easier than having an uncomfortable conversation with his girlfriend. That's not true, Daniel protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked about my job, my life, my relationships without needing something from me? Silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any answer they could have given. I'll tell you when, I continued. Before Olivia. Everything changed when she entered the picture. And you were so desperate to keep her happy that you threw away 28 years of sibling relationship without even realizing it. You're being dramatic, Olivia said, but there was less fire in it now. Am I? Tell me, Olivia, have you ever encouraged Daniel to spend time with me? Have you ever suggested including me in your plans? Have you ever said a single positive thing about me to him? The silence stretched even longer this time, which was really all the answer anyone needed. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the bank's prefix. That'll be your loan officer, I said, declining the call. You might want to answer when they call you. I stood up and walked toward the door, but Daniel jumped up to block my path like a desperate goalkeeper. Lucy, please, just give us a chance to fix this somehow. Fix what, exactly? The mortgage? Or the fact that you've become someone I don't recognize? Both. I don't know. Everything. His voice cracked with desperation. You're my sister. Your family. Then you should have treated me like family instead of like an inconvenient obligation. I didn't realize. You didn't want to realize. There's a difference. His phone started ringing then. The bank, calling to deliver the news that their dream house had just become someone else's opportunity. Answer it, I said gently. Deal with the immediate crisis. We can discuss the relationship damage later. Will you consider changing your mind? If we can prove things will be different? I looked at this man who used to be my best friend, my closest family member, my partner in surviving our parents' dysfunction, the person who had somehow transformed into someone willing to exclude me from major life events to avoid his girlfriend's discomfort. I honestly don't know, Daniel, but right now I'm more interested in protecting myself from people who claim to love me while treating me like garbage. I left them there with their ringing phone and their collapsing dreams. In my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete and total peace. For the first time in over a year, I didn't have to wonder whether I'd be included or excluded, valued or dismissed. I didn't have to manage anyone else's feelings or walk on eggshells to avoid creating uncomfortable situations. I'd chosen myself for once, and it felt remarkably liberating. The rest of that day was exactly as predictable as you'd expect. My phone rang constantly with calls from Daniel, Olivia, my parents, my Aunt Sarah, basically everyone in our family who had an opinion about financial responsibility and family loyalty. I let every single call go to voicemail and spent the afternoon researching graduate programs in psychology. Because apparently, surviving family dysfunction qualifies as relevant life experience for helping other people navigate their own relationship disasters. Who knew? By evening, I had 17 voicemail messages waiting for me. I poured myself a well-deserved glass of wine and listened to them like they were episodes of a particularly dramatic podcast. The progression was fascinating from a psychological standpoint. Panic, anger, guilt-tripping, and finally desperate bargaining. If you ever want to understand family dynamics, just threaten someone's mortgage and watch how quickly everyone reveals their true priorities. Daniel, 2:47 p.m. Lucy, the bank called. They're pulling our loan. Please just call me back. We need to figure this out. Mom, 3:15 p.m. Lucy, honey, Daniel told me what happened. I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding. You need to call him back. Dad, 3:42 p.m. Lucy, your mother is very upset. This family drama needs to stop. Call Daniel and work this out like adults. Olivia, 4:18 p.m. Lucy, I know you're angry, but please don't let that anger hurt Daniel. He doesn't deserve this. Interesting how it's always about what Daniel deserves, never what I deserved. Aunt Sarah, 4:55 p.m. Lucy, what is going on? Daniel is calling everyone asking for help with a mortgage. Did you really withdraw your support? Yes, Aunt Sarah, I really did. Wild concept, I know. The messages continued in this vein, each one more desperate than the last, each one confirming that I'd made exactly the right decision. But the final message, left at 8:23 p.m., was different. Daniel again, but his voice was quiet, defeated, stripped of all the earlier panic. Lucy, I know you're not going to answer, but I need you to know we talked to 5 different banks today. None of them will approve us without a co-signer. My credit isn't good enough alone, and Olivia's student loans are too high. Without you, we can't get the house. There was a long pause, and I could hear Olivia crying in the background. Actually crying, not the strategic tears some people deploy during arguments. I know you're angry. I know you think I chose her over you, and maybe you're right. But Lucy, we're supposed to be family. Family forgives each other. Family doesn't destroy each other over one mistake. One mistake. He was still calling it one mistake. Please, he continued, his voice breaking. Just give me a chance to make this right. I'll do whatever you want. We'll include you in the wedding planning. We'll have another engagement party, whatever. Just please don't take away our future because I messed up one evening. The message ended, and I sat there staring at my phone. Part of me, the part that had loved Daniel unconditionally for 28 years, wanted to call him back, wanted to fix this, restore peace, be the bigger person who forgave and forgot. But the stronger part of me, the part that had finally learned to value my own dignity, knew that calling him back would change nothing fundamental. He would promise to do better, and maybe he'd even mean it temporarily. But Olivia would still be there, still threatened by my relationship with him, still working to minimize my presence in their lives. And Daniel would still choose her comfort over my dignity, because that's who he'd become. The next morning brought a text from Olivia. Lucy, I know you hate me, but please don't punish Daniel for my mistakes. I was wrong about the engagement party. I was insecure and jealous, and I handled it badly. But Daniel doesn't deserve to lose his dream house because of my issues. Please reconsider. It was a good apology, mature, taking responsibility, hitting all the right notes. If it had come 6 months ago, it might have meant something. But here's the thing about apologies. Timing matters. You can't treat someone terribly for a year, then apologize only when you need something from them. That's not remorse, that's strategy. I was getting ready for work when someone knocked on my door. Through the peephole, I could see Daniel standing on my porch with flowers and what looked like a bakery box. Because nothing says, I'm sorry for systematically excluding you from family events, like pastries, right? I opened the door but didn't invite him in. I brought breakfast, he said, holding up the box with hopeful desperation. Those chocolate croissants you love from Marcello's. I'm not hungry. Lucy, please. Just 5 minutes. I looked at my brother, really looked at him. Dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes. The kind of exhausted desperation that comes from realizing you've made a catastrophic mistake, but having no idea how to fix it. And despite everything, I still loved him. That was the worst part. I could see clearly how badly he'd treated me, how completely he'd prioritized Olivia over our relationship, and I still loved this idiot. 5 minutes, I said. He sat on my couch like he was afraid it might collapse under him. I know I messed up. I know I've been a terrible brother. Go on. Olivia was insecure about us. About how close we were. She thought you didn't like her, and it felt easier to just manage the situation by keeping you two apart, by excluding me, by making compromises that I thought would keep everyone happy. Everyone except me. He was quiet for a long moment. I was a coward, Lucy. I took the easy path, and that path led away from you. I'm sorry. It was a decent apology, better than Olivia's, because it came from someone who actually knew what he'd lost. I believe you're sorry. Daniel, but I need you to understand something. This isn't about the engagement party anymore. This isn't even about the house. Then what is it about? It's about the fact that you became a different person in this relationship, and that person doesn't value me. Maybe you can change back. Maybe you can't. But I'm not going to risk my financial future on maybe. So this is permanent? You're really going to let us lose the house? I'm really going to protect myself from people who have proven they can't be trusted with my well-being. But we're family. And there it was again. The family card, played like it was some kind of trump that automatically forgave all sins. Are we? Because family doesn't deliberately humiliate each other. Family doesn't lie about restaurant reservations. Family doesn't choose their partner's insecurity over their sibling's dignity. Daniel stared at those untouched chocolate croissants for several minutes before speaking again. What would it take for you to trust me again? The question I'd been dreading, because I knew the answer and I knew he wouldn't like it. Honestly, I don't think there's anything you can do right now. The damage is too deep, Daniel. You'd need to fundamentally change how you prioritize relationships. And I don't see that happening while you're with someone who views me as a threat. You're asking me to choose between you and her. No, I'm not. I'm making my own choice to step back from a dynamic that hurts me. What you do about your relationship is entirely up to you. He left the pastries on my coffee table when he went. probably hoping I'd eat them and remember how much I loved him, how good things used to be between us. Instead, I threw them away. Some bridges burn for good reason. 3 weeks later, the consequences of my decision had rippled through both our lives in exactly the ways I'd expected, and a few I hadn't. Daniel and Olivia lost the house, obviously. The sellers found another buyer within days. Apparently, there's no shortage of people who can actually qualify for their own mortgages. Who knew? But the more interesting development was watching my family gradually realize that I hadn't been the dramatic, oversensitive sister after all. Funny how context changes everything. It started when my mother called, her voice careful and controlled in that way that meant she'd been thinking about something for days. "Lucy, I need to ask you something, and I want complete honesty." "Okay." "When Daniel and Olivia planned their engagement party, did you really have no idea you weren't invited?" I paused, trying to figure out where this was going. "I had no idea, Mom. I bought a dress, got my hair done, showed up expecting to celebrate with family, and discovered there was no place for me." "And you're certain it wasn't some kind of mistake?" "They confirmed 11 people the morning of the dinner. I was number 12. "That's not a mistake." Long silence. "I see," she said finally. "I had lunch with Olivia's mother yesterday." Oh, this should be enlightening. She mentioned that Olivia had been very stressed about the engagement party. Apparently, she'd spent weeks planning who to invite, where to seat everyone, how to manage what she called family dynamics. Go on. According to her mother, Olivia spent an entire afternoon explaining why you couldn't be at the dinner. She had reasons, justifications, a whole presentation about why it would be better for everyone if you weren't there. The casual revelation that my exclusion had been planned with PowerPoint precision was almost impressive in a deeply disturbing way. Her mother thought it was strange, Mom continued. She kept asking, "But what did Lucy do wrong?" And Olivia couldn't give her a straight answer. "What did she say?" "Just kept saying it would be complicated and uncomfortable if you were there." I felt vindicated and sick at the same time. It was one thing to suspect Olivia had orchestrated my exclusion. It was another to have it confirmed by someone who'd witnessed the planning process. "Why are you telling me this, Mom?" "Because I owe you an apology. When Daniel first told us what happened, I assumed you'd misunderstood something. I thought maybe you were being oversensitive. And now? Now I realize my daughter was systematically excluded from a family event by someone who put more effort into keeping you away than most people put into planning their entire wedding." The conversation that followed was one of the most honest we'd ever had. Mom admitted that the family had failed me, that they'd chosen the path of least resistance instead of asking hard questions about why Daniel's sister wasn't at his celebration. But the real validation came from an unexpected source, Dad. He showed up at my house that Saturday with a photo from the engagement party, a candid shot someone had taken during what looked like a family toast. In it, everyone was raising their glasses and smiling, but there was something off about Daniel's expression. He was looking past the camera, toward the restaurant entrance, like he was waiting for someone who never came. "He spent the whole evening like that," Dad said, "looking around like he was expecting you to walk in and join the celebration." "That's not my problem, Dad." I know it's not. But I wanted you to see this because I need you to know that your absence was felt." "By who?" "Daniel? Because he certainly didn't feel it when he was confirming 11 people for dinner. By all of us, Lucy. By everyone who knows this family." Dad sat down and pulled out another photo. The family table from later in the evening. Empty champagne glasses, scattered napkins, the remnants of celebration I'd missed. "We failed you," he said simply. "As parents, as family, as people who claim to love you. We stood by and let someone exclude you from a family event. And then we blamed you for protecting yourself." It was the apology I'd needed to hear. The acknowledgement that I hadn't been unreasonable or dramatic or wrong to expect basic inclusion in family celebrations. "Where does this leave us?" I asked. "That's up to you. I'd like to rebuild our relationship, but on your terms." "What about Daniel?" "Daniel made his choices. He's living with the consequences. His house hunting isn't going well, apparently. Turns out losing your down payment and having a rejected mortgage application makes it harder to qualify for rentals, too." I almost felt bad about that. Almost. Have you ever experienced something that completely changed your family? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about setting boundaries and choosing yourself. The wedding invitations arrived 2 months later, delivered to my doorstep with my name written in the same careful calligraphy they'd used for the engagement party I wasn't invited to. I opened it out of curiosity more than anything else. Elegant cream cardstock, gold foil lettering, all the expensive touches that screamed, "We're still having our dream wedding, just not in our dream house." Tucked behind the main invitation was a handwritten note from Daniel. "Lucy, I know things have been difficult, but you're my sister and I want you at my wedding. We've reserved a seat for you at the family table. Daniel, a seat at the family table. How gracious. I called him directly. Lucy, I was hoping you'd call. Did you get the invitation? I did, and I won't be coming. The silence that followed was long enough for me to make and drink an entire cup of coffee. Lucy, please. It's my wedding day. I'm aware of that. I need you there. Why? So you can have the picture-perfect family wedding where all the expected people are in all the expected seats? Or because you actually value my presence in your life? That's not fair. Isn't it? Tell me, Daniel. If I came to your wedding, would I be included in any other wedding events? The bachelor party activities? The wedding planning discussions? Or would I just be expected to show up, smile, and pretend the last 6 months never happened? He couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. I thought so, I said. Daniel, I hope you have a beautiful wedding. I hope your marriage is everything you want it to be, but I won't be there to witness it. But you're my sister. Then you should have treated me like one. I hung up and went back to researching graduate programs. Turns out there's a growing field in family systems therapy, and I was starting to think I might have some relevant experience to offer. The wedding day arrived on a perfect Saturday in May. I knew this because I woke up to 14 text messages from various family members asking if I was really not coming and reminding me how much I was hurting Daniel. I deleted them all and went for a run. While Daniel and Olivia were exchanging vows, I was at the farmer's market. While they were taking family photos with a carefully coordinated guest list, I was gardening. While they were celebrating their new marriage, I was reading a book that had nothing to do with family drama. It was honestly one of the most peaceful Saturdays I'd had in months. Around 9 p.m., my phone rang with Daniel's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. What could he possibly have to say on his wedding night? But curiosity got the better of me. Lucy? Congratulations on your wedding, Daniel. You really didn't come. I told you I wouldn't. I kept thinking, hoping, that maybe you'd change your mind. I could hear music and celebration in the background. The reception was clearly in full swing. How was the ceremony? Beautiful, perfect. He paused, but empty. It felt empty without you there. Did it? Everyone kept asking where you were. I had to keep explaining that you couldn't make it. Is that what you told them? That I couldn't make it? What was I supposed to say? That my sister refused to come because I hurt her feelings? Even now, he couldn't accurately describe what had happened between us. Daniel, you didn't hurt my feelings. You systematically excluded me from your life to appease your wife's insecurities. I know I messed up. But Lucy, this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and instead I spent the whole ceremony thinking about how wrong it felt that you weren't there. That sounds like a problem you should have considered before you decided my presence was too complicated for family events. Please, just come to the reception. It's not too late. It is too late, Daniel. Not for tonight. For us. So that's it? You're giving up on family completely? I looked around my living room, my space, decorated with my choices, filled with my books and my plants and my peace. I'm not giving up on family. I'm accepting what ours has become. You chose someone who saw me as a threat instead of a sister. You chose to manage that by pushing me away instead of setting boundaries with her. Those were your choices and they have consequences. I can choose differently now. Can you? Are you going to tell Olivia she was wrong to exclude me from your engagement party? Are you going to acknowledge publicly that my absence was planned, not accidental? Silence. What am I supposed to do without you? The question that revealed everything. His focus on his own loss without considering mine. You're supposed to build a life with your wife. You're supposed to learn that love requires more than just showing up when it's convenient. After I hung up, I had 12 more messages from the wedding. Photos, videos, updates from family members who thought I should see what I was missing. I deleted them all without looking. Some chapters of your life end exactly when they're supposed to. 6 months later, I ran into Daniel at the grocery store. Pure coincidence. I was buying ingredients for dinner with friends. He was apparently shopping for whatever newlyweds eat when they're still figuring out domestic life. He looked different, thinner maybe, or just worn down in a way that had nothing to do with weight. When he saw me, his face went through several expressions before settling on cautious hope. Lucy. Hi. Hi, Daniel. We stood there in the produce section like two people who used to know each other but couldn't quite remember how. How are you doing? He asked, and it sounded like he genuinely wanted to know. Good. Really good, actually. You? Okay. Yeah. We're okay. The pause before okay told me everything I needed to know about how married life was treating him. How's the apartment hunting going? I asked, because I'm not completely heartless and I knew they were still trying to find a place to rent. Challenging. Turns out having a rejected mortgage application makes landlords nervous. But we found a place finally. Small, but it's ours. That's good. Another awkward silence filled with the ambient noise of grocery shopping around us. Lucy, he said finally, I've been wanting to call you, to tell you that you were right. About everything. Okay. The way we treated you, the way I treated you, it was wrong. I see that now. I believed him, but recognition after the fact doesn't undo the damage. I appreciate you saying that. Do you think there's any way we could try to fix this? Maybe get coffee sometime and talk? I looked at my brother. This person I'd loved unconditionally for most of my life, who'd traded our relationship for someone else's approval. He looked genuinely remorseful, genuinely sorry. But sorry doesn't automatically rebuild trust. Daniel, I'm glad you recognize what happened, but I'm not ready to pretend it didn't happen just because you apologized. I'm not asking you to pretend anything. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be better. Better how? Are you going to tell Olivia that her behavior toward me was unacceptable? Are you going to set clear boundaries about how she talks about me or treats me? His face fell slightly. It's complicated. No, it's not. It's actually very simple. Either you're willing to stand up for me or you're not. Either my dignity matters to you or it doesn't. Of course it matters. Then prove it. Not to me. To yourself. Figure out what kind of brother you want to be. And then we can talk about whether that's someone I want in my life. I finished my shopping and went home to friends who actually enjoyed my company. Daniel went home to Olivia, who was still probably finding ways to blame me for their housing situation. The difference was, I was happy with my choice. A year after the wedding, I didn't attend. Something interesting happened. I stopped caring about Daniel's opinion of me. Not in a bitter, angry way. In a genuinely peaceful way. I'd spent so much energy for so long trying to maintain our relationship, trying to be understanding about Olivia's insecurities, trying to be the accommodating sister who didn't rock the boat. And for what? So I could be excluded from family celebrations and blamed for my own marginalization? I'd built a life without them. A good life. I'd started graduate school, made new friends, dated someone who thought my relationship with my family was concerning rather than something I should accept. I'd learned what it felt like to be valued instead of tolerated. The revelation came during a therapy session. Yes, I'd started therapy because apparently surviving family dysfunction requires professional help sometimes. My therapist asked me a simple question. When you think about reconciling with Daniel, what do you feel? I expected to feel sadness, or hope, or even anger. Instead, I felt tired. Just tired. I think I'm done, I said out loud for the first time. I think I'm done trying to maintain a relationship with someone who has to be convinced to treat me well. It was liberating in a way I hadn't expected. That weekend, I got a call from Mom. Daniel and Olivia are having marriage problems, she said without preamble. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say, Mom? That I'm surprised? That I feel bad for them? I thought you might want to know. Why would I want to know about Daniel's marriage problems? She was quiet for a moment. Because he's your brother. He's someone who shares DNA with me. That doesn't make him my problem. Lucy, that's harsh. Is it? Or is it realistic? Daniel chose his priorities a long time ago. How his choices work out for him isn't my responsibility. The conversation ended awkwardly, but I didn't feel bad about it. I'd spent too many years being responsible for other people's feelings to start taking that on again. 2 weeks later, Daniel called me directly. First time in months. Lucy, I need to tell you something. Okay. Olivia and I are separated. I waited for some reaction. Satisfaction, sympathy, curiosity about the details. Nothing came. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Really? I'm sorry you're going through a difficult time, but I'm not surprised and I'm not interested in the details. Lucy, I know you think this proves you were right about her, but Daniel, I don't think about Olivia at all anymore. I don't think about your marriage or your relationship problems or whether I was right about anything. I've moved on. What does that mean? It means I'm not available to be your emotional support system while you figure out your life. It means I'm not interested in hearing about how difficult things are or how you've learned from your mistakes. It means I'm done being involved in your drama. But we're family. That word again, deployed like it was magic. No, we're not. Family doesn't exclude each other from major life events. Family doesn't prioritize their spouse's comfort over their siblings' dignity. Family doesn't apologize only when they need something. I never said I needed anything from you. Didn't you? Why else would you call to tell me about your separation? Because you thought I'd be thrilled? Because you thought I'd want to hear I told you so? Or because you're hoping I'll comfort you through this difficult time? Silence. That's what I thought. Lucy, please. I know I hurt you, but Daniel, you didn't hurt me. You taught me something valuable. You taught me that some people only value you when it's convenient for them. You taught me that I deserve better than being someone's backup plan. That's not what you were, wasn't it? I was good enough to guarantee your mortgage, but not good enough to invite to your celebration. I was important enough to call when your marriage fell apart, but not important enough to defend when your wife was excluding me. If that's not a backup plan, what is? I hung up before he could answer. The next day, I blocked his number. Not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. I'd finally learned that some relationships cost more than they're worth. 18 months after I'd last spoken to Daniel, I was living my best life. Graduate school was going well. I was dating someone wonderful who thought my family stories were alarming rather than normal, and I'd started a small practice helping other people navigate toxic family dynamics. Turns out there's a market for therapists who understand manipulation from personal experience. Who knew? I'd bought a small house, with a mortgage I could actually afford on my own, imagine that, and was hosting a housewarming party when my phone rang with Mom's number. "Lucy, I need to ask you something. Can it wait? I have people over. Daniel wants to know if you'd be willing to meet with him." I almost laughed. "Why?" "He says he has things he wants to say to you. He's been in therapy." "Good for him. The answer is no." "Lucy, he's really changed." "I'm sure he has." "The answer is still no." "Don't you want to hear what he has to say?" "Not particularly. I've heard Daniel's apologies before. They don't last. This is different." "Mom, I'm going to say something, and I want you to really listen. I don't owe Daniel my time, my attention, or my forgiveness just because we share parents. He made choices that destroyed our relationship, and now he has to live with those choices. But family? Family is supposed to treat each other well. Family is supposed to protect each other, not sacrifice each other for someone else's comfort. Daniel failed at being family long before I stopped trying. I hung up and went back to my party, surrounded by people who'd chosen to be in my life and who I'd chosen to be in mine. People who celebrated my successes instead of excluding me from celebrations. People who valued my presence instead of managing it. But the calls didn't stop. Aunt Sarah tried next, then Dad, then my cousin Rebecca. Everyone had the same message. Daniel was sorry. Daniel had changed. Daniel wanted to make amends. Finally, I sent a group text to the whole family. "I am not interested in reconciling with Daniel. Please stop asking. My boundaries are not a family discussion topic." The responses were immediate and predictable. Some people understood. Others thought I was being too harsh. A few suggested family therapy, as if the problem was our inability to communicate rather than Daniel's fundamental choice to prioritize his wife's insecurities over my dignity. But one response surprised me. It was from my cousin Mark, Daniel's age, who I'd always thought was closer to him than to me. "Lucy, I think you should know that most of us understood why you withdrew your support for their mortgage. Olivia made it pretty clear over the years that she didn't like you, and Daniel just went along with it. You did what you had to do to protect yourself. Don't let anyone guilt you into thinking otherwise." It was validation I hadn't expected from that side of the family. The final attempt came from Daniel himself, in the form of a letter delivered to my office. Handwritten, several pages long, detailing everything he'd learned in therapy about himself, his relationship patterns, and his failures as a brother. It was a good letter, thoughtful, specific, taking full responsibility without making excuses. If it had come 3 years earlier, it might have meant something. But here's what I'd learned. People can change, but that doesn't obligate you to stick around to watch it happen. People can grow and learn and become better versions of themselves, but their improvement doesn't erase the damage they caused when they were worse. I read the letter, acknowledged that it represented real growth on his part, and then put it in my filing cabinet. Not to save as evidence of his change, but to remember why boundaries exist in the first place. Some relationships end exactly when they should, even if it takes time to recognize it. 2 years after the letter, I was having brunch with friends when one of them mentioned seeing a wedding announcement in the local paper. "Daniel Matthews and Emma Chen," she read from her phone. "Wasn't your brother's name Daniel?" I nearly choked on my mimosa. His first marriage only ended a year ago. "Maybe he's a quick learner this time?" my friend suggested optimistically. I seriously doubted it, but it wasn't my problem anymore. What was interesting was my complete lack of emotional response to the news. No anger, no hurt, no curiosity about who Emma Chen was or whether she'd be better than Olivia. Just nothing. It was like hearing about a stranger's life events. The wedding invitation never came, which was probably for the best. I couldn't decide if not being invited was insulting or considerate, and I realized I didn't care enough to figure it out. 3 months after Daniel's second wedding, Olivia reached out to me on social media. A long message detailing her own journey of self-discovery post-divorce, her recognition of how badly she'd treated me, and her desire to apologize properly. "I realize now that I was intimidated by your relationship with Daniel," she wrote. "I felt threatened by how close you two were, and instead of working on my own insecurity, I tried to eliminate what I saw as competition. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." It was a mature apology, more self-aware than anything she'd ever said to me directly. But it was also about 5 years too late. I read it, appreciated that she'd done the work to understand her behavior, and then deleted it without responding. Her growth was commendable, but it wasn't my responsibility to validate or forgive her just because she'd finally figured out what the rest of us already knew. The most interesting development came 6 months later, when I ran into Daniel's best friend Mike at a coffee shop. We'd always gotten along well, and I was curious how he was processing all the family drama. "Can I ask you something honestly?" I said after we'd caught up on safe topics. "Sure. Do you think I was wrong to withdraw from Daniel's mortgage?" Mike was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee with more attention than it required. "Lucy, I was at that engagement party." "Oh, I watched you walk in. I watched you realize there was no place for you, and I watched you leave with more dignity than most people could manage in that situation. What did you think at the time?" "At the time? I thought someone had made a mistake with the reservation. It didn't occur to me that it was intentional until Daniel started explaining why you weren't there." "What did he say?" "That you'd been difficult about the wedding planning, that Olivia was stressed about family dynamics, that it was better for everyone if they kept the party small." Mike looked directly at me. "But Lucy, you'd barely been involved in the wedding planning. You hadn't been difficult about anything. And 11 people isn't exactly small. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I'm his friend, not his conscience." But honestly, I lost a lot of respect for him that night. The Daniel I grew up with would never have excluded his sister from something that important. And now he's married to someone else and probably making the same mistakes all over again, because he never actually dealt with why he was willing to sacrifice his relationship with you for Olivia's approval. It was confirmation of something I'd suspected but had never been able to verify. Even Daniel's closest friends had recognized that my exclusion was wrong. The conversation stayed with me for weeks, not because I needed external validation of my choice, but because it reminded me how many people had witnessed my mistreatment and said nothing at the time. How many family members had attended that engagement party, noticed my absence, and accepted whatever explanation they were given without question. How many people had watched Daniel prioritize Olivia's comfort over my dignity and decided it wasn't their business to intervene. It reinforced everything I'd learned about the difference between people who love you and people who love the idea of you. Real love shows up. Real love speaks up. Real love doesn't stand by while you're being mistreated and then later admit they thought it was wrong. I'd built a life surrounded by people who would actually defend me if someone tried to exclude me from important events. People who valued my presence instead of managing it. People who understood that love requires more than just showing up when it's convenient. Daniel had taught me what I deserved, just not in the way he'd intended. 5 years after I'd removed my name from Daniel's mortgage, I was exactly where I'd never imagined I'd be, genuinely happy without him in my life. I'd finished my graduate degree, built a thriving practice helping people navigate toxic family relationships, and married someone who thought my family stories were cautionary tales rather than normal dynamics to accept. My husband Jake often said he couldn't understand how I'd survived as long as I did in that environment. "Your family treated you like a supporting character in everyone else's story," he observed after meeting them at my cousin's wedding. "No wonder you thought that was normal." The wedding had been interesting. Daniel was there with Emma, his second wife, who seemed nice enough in the generic way that all second wives seem nice when you're comparing them to dramatically problematic first wives. Daniel and I had exchanged polite pleasantries, the kind of interaction you have with distant relatives you see at funerals and weddings. "You look good, Lucy," he'd said, like he was surprised I was thriving without his presence in my life. "Thanks. You too." And that was it. No dramatic confrontation, no attempt at deeper conversation, no suggestion that we should catch up sometime. Just two people who used to be siblings making small talk at a family event. But the real revelation came later, during the reception, when I overheard a conversation between Daniel and our cousin Sarah. "I still think about Lucy sometimes," he was saying. "Wonder if I could have handled things differently." "You could have," Sarah replied bluntly. "You could have included her in your engagement party instead of letting Olivia exclude her. You could have defended her instead of making her the problem. I know that now. Did you know it then?" Silence. "That's what I thought. Daniel, Lucy gave you everything. She supported your relationship even when Olivia was systematically excluding her from family events. She co-signed your mortgage when she had every reason to be suspicious of how she was being treated, and you repaid her by humiliating her in front of the whole family. I was trying to keep everyone happy. No, you were trying to keep Olivia happy. There's a difference. And now Lucy's built a life that doesn't include you, and honestly, good for her." I walked away before I could hear his response. But the conversation confirmed what I'd long suspected. Everyone in my family understood exactly what had happened and why I'd made the choices I did. The mortgage situation had just been the final straw in a pattern of exclusion that had been obvious to anyone paying attention. Later that evening, my mother approached me at the dessert table. "Lucy, I want you to know I think you made the right choice." "About what?" "About protecting yourself. About setting boundaries. About refusing to be treated badly just because we're family." It was an acknowledgement I'd waited years to hear. "I wish I'd spoken up sooner," she continued. "I wish I'd asked harder questions when Daniel started excluding you from things. I wish I'd been the mother you deserved instead of the mother who prioritized peace over protection." "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive him?" I considered the question seriously. "I think I already have, in the sense that I'm not angry about what happened anymore. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, and it doesn't mean pretending the relationship was different than it actually was." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Daniel and I were never as close as I thought we were. If we had been, he wouldn't have been willing to sacrifice our relationship for someone else's comfort. I've learned the difference between loving someone and being attached to the idea of them. And which was Daniel? An idea I had about what family should be like. The reality was someone who valued me only when it was convenient and cost-free." As Jake and I drove home that night, he asked me how I felt about seeing Daniel. "Relieved," I said, and meant it. "Relieved how?" "Relieved that I'm not still trying to fix a relationship that was fundamentally unequal. Relieved that I don't have to manage his feelings or accommodate his wife's insecurities. Relieved that I learned to choose myself before I wasted any more years accepting less than I deserved." "Any regrets?" "Just one." "What's that?" "I wish I'd learned to set boundaries sooner. I wish I hadn't needed to be humiliated at an engagement party to figure out that some people only value you when they need something from you. But that was a lesson worth learning, even if it came at the cost of a relationship I'd thought was permanent." Daniel and Olivia had continued their life exactly as I'd expected. They'd rented apartments, blamed their housing difficulties on my withdrawal from their mortgage, and eventually divorced when the foundation of exclusion and manipulation proved insufficient for building a lasting marriage. Daniel had remarried quickly, probably to someone who didn't know about his track record of sacrificing family relationships for romantic approval. The cycle would likely continue until he learned to value people instead of managing them. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I'd built something better. A life filled with people who chose me consistently, who valued my presence instead of tolerating it, who understood that love requires showing up even when it's inconvenient. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about family dynamics, boundary setting, and the courage it takes to choose yourself when everyone else expects you to choose them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone else's bad behavior, even when that someone is family, especially when that someone is family.